All right, I'm on with Ondřej in the Czech Republic. Ondřej, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing really well, thanks to the ability to speak with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well because I'm talking to you. I understand you're just off a 12-hour work shift. Is your brain fried? Do I have you for 10 minutes?
Yeah, you do. My performance in English is not quite fine. It's not up to my usual standards, but I think that we'll manage it somehow.
I think we'll be okay. Don't worry, my English isn't perfect either. Okay, so let's just start off broad. So you're 23 years old. You live in the Czech Republic. I feel like people have no idea even what the Czech Republic is, for other people at least. You guys know. Just tell me a little bit about the Czech Republic and what it's like being there as a young adult.
Well, the Czech Republic, just so we fit in geographically, it's right between Germany, Poland, Austria, and Slovakia. So we are surrounded by these rather big countries, and we like to call ourselves the center of Europe. We are Central European. We are not Eastern. We are not Western. Yeah. Which means that historically, we have sometimes the Bohemian Kingdom has managed to have a large influence over Europe. And we as the people, we like to do our own thing, really, which kind of fits into the Central European idea. We take the best from the East, the best from the West, and we somehow fit it into a mold that we call us being Czechs, really. Being a small country in the center of Europe is kind of a hard task, actually, because during history, we were often threatened. We were ruled by other countries several times, many times, and yet we persisted. How? Simply, we pretended that we are completely stupid. We just don't.
Has that been the trick? Is that the grand trick in the world?
If I can suggest to you a great novel, it's a Czech classic. I don't know it in English, but it's basically Good Soldier Švejk. And it's about a soldier that survives the bureaucracy of the First World War by pretending to be completely dumb. Yet, if you kind of read into it, he's extremely intelligent, and he is able to manipulate these huge other countries and its representatives by just being in the way of, I'm not able to do anything, I don't know anything, yeah, I just messed up, I don't know what I just done. While he extremely precisely knows just what he does. And
is your strategy here of telling me, and thus the world, what the strategy is, that may not be the best strategy in and of itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you do not have to be a threat to survive.
Yeah.
You just have to survive. You just have to be left at the end, that you are still there and you are still yourself. And that's it, really. Yeah,
and you guys really are. I mean, there obviously is a checkered past of war and what happened in World War II and the Nazis and basically the West, or the Allies sort of offering up Czechoslovakia and all that didn't work out. One of the things you wanted to talk to me about was the connection between your president now and what you see happening to us in Donald Trump. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, I have set up like 3 points. I'm going to just skim through them very rapidly.
Sure.
First of all, we Czechs and you Americans, we historically have kind of similar tendencies. We are both nations, in my opinion. This is all my personal opinion. We like to do our own thing. We like to sort of approach historical events in our own specific way. And we both do not really like other countries and other people telling us what we should do. Because it's our destiny, it's our idea. So, when we look at the presidential campaign of President Zeman, now, just listen here, and if it sounds similar.
Okay.
In the second part of the campaign, it was President Zeman versus, Miloš Zeman at the time, versus Karel Schwarzenberg. Mr. Schwarzenberg was hugely supported by mainstream media. He was the hip candidate for the young people. He was portrayed as a punk rocker somehow. I don't know how, but it happened. His biggest cool point was that he said that whenever they are talking about bullshit in the parliament, he falls asleep. That was like the, yeah, good job. So
that was the gotcha that he had, okay.
Yeah. And President Zeman, he was just portrayed in the media as somebody absolutely awful or like irrelevant. He wasn't important. He wasn't like, yeah, that guy, he has a sure chance to win. Well, the second round came in and he was the other candidate. He was like, well, if you don't like being told what to do, there you go. And we have President Zeman because we as Czechs do not like being told what to do. Majorly. There are some people who are like, yeah, I don't want Zeman. I want Schwarzenberg. Fine, that's their choice. But we still have President Zeman. And honestly, I believe that he might win his second term. He has a really huge chance.
When you guys were watching our presidential race, was there, judging by what you're saying about sort of the ethos of the Czech people, I guess there were probably a lot of people that were probably very down and that liked Trump, right?
Absolutely. And it was the same people that supported Zeman for the exact same reason. We were being told, again, by our own mainstream media, that Hillary Clinton is absolutely certain to win, that Trump cannot be allowed to win, that it will just be mayhem, insane waves of criticism on every point he has ever done. I haven't really seen any positive coverage of him. Which, I mean, I know that journalism, mainstream journalism, has to be owned by somebody. I understand it. But we can at least pretend to have some little bias. Not just being, okay, we are supporting this candidate, and our main Czech television is supporting Hillary. TV Nova, one of the biggest TV channels in the Czech Republic, supports Hillary. And nobody really cares about why Trump might be a cool idea for some people.
Right. It's funny the way you frame that. It's like just pretend. If they would just fake it, maybe they would do a little better. So there were a couple other things that you wanted to talk about, but the one that I kind of want to focus on for the rest is that you say that there are a certain level of acceptable criminals, which I thought was kind of interesting. That basically, I think your premise is that a certain amount of us are going to do drugs. A certain amount of us are going to engage in low-level petty crime, and that's just kind of how society exists. So I'm curious, first off, did I say that correctly? And secondly, where does that idea come from within you?
Well, you have said that absolutely correctly. And it comes from the fact that I grew up in sort of like sídliště, or in English it will probably be the projects. It's basically these huge concrete buildings set up in one place to sort of provide housing for a lot of people in one place. Which generally provides for a lot of low-level criminality, drug sales, sometimes some other crimes. I grew up in Ústecký kraj, which is one of the poorest regions in the Czech Republic, and I have basically managed to meet a drug dealer every 20 minutes I walked out of my home.
Jeez.
It just happens. I mean, it's not something awful, it's just what happens. For me, the thing is that people generally want things. I think we can both agree on that. Every and each one of us wants something. And for example, if we take the drug idea, people, they have a tendency, drug users, I'm talking about them, they have a tendency to sort of use drugs as a tool to enhance their mind experience. So they feel in a different way by using a specific substance, and it makes them feel the way they exactly want to, in the borders, which means that they are going to have to obtain this substance. And some people just want to get high, as Kurt Russell said. And since they want to get high, they need to obtain this substance, and they have to obtain it from someone. And since we have the basically prohibition, as it was with alcohol in America, we have the same thing with drugs, basically. And this means that there has to be a black market to provide for this need, which means that there is going to be drug dealers, the low-level ones that just sell it to the people. There will probably be the higher-level ones that are quite organized, and these are the ones that generate a lot of money. And what do these people do to continue on this sort of trade, to continue on their business? Well, they are going to probably have to get somebody in the police, for example, that will cover for them. Now, we can't prove any of this, obviously, or otherwise it will probably get out.
Right.
But it's kind of logical that they want to protect their own interests, which leads to the corruption. Some people really just want to get more money, because I mean, 20,000 crowns isn't really you can live on it quite comfortably, but you can't really be like, yeah, I'm finally I got it, I'm loaded. You just
So your basic argument is that this stuff is going to happen in society no matter what. So sort of let's not waste resources and let's not kind of fight human nature. But the last thing that I want to ask you about is, which I wasn't planning on, but now that I know all this about you, just tell me, how did you now, as someone that's obviously very bright and in school and all that, how did you get out of this, if that's what you grew up in?
Well, I basically had to leave. I just left. I left the region. I'm currently I left for work, basically. I'm traveling to work like for 4.5 hours, and I'm just working every day. And I'm living my whole life, saving up some money, and I'm completely fine. But it has to take, you gotta get out of a certain mindset that you basically, well, what do you do with your free time? You meet up with friends, you buy something, you use it, and then you are experiencing the world. And that's basically all you are doing with your time. Mm-hmm. And after some time, it gets kind of boring, really. It gets funny. So I just wanted to experience life in a way that isn't filled with death. I just want to be able to actually go somewhere, to experience something, to have this conversation with you. I wouldn't be able to do this if I lived back in that region, because I would just be tempted to get back into that lifestyle, and I just can't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, I sense a budding philosopher in you. I think years from now we're going to look back on this and go, that guy wrote a couple pretty good books about things.
Well, I would be quite honored by that statement.
Yeah. All right, well, it was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with everything.
Well, have a nice day, nice evening, and I would say glorious day to all the fans.
All right, I am on with Zach in Dallas. Zach, how's it going?
It's going great.
Nice. Well, you know what? I'm going to do something a little different with you, because I'm going to read the first sentence that you wrote right out. This is in your words. You wrote, "I am a gay, mixed race, white/Latino, transvestite Trump supporter." You've given me a lot. You've given me a lot to work with here, my friend. So, all right, let's get to it. I think the most interesting part first is the word transvestite, because you did not write trans or transsexual, transvestite. So let's start there.
All right, so transvestite. I love wearing women's clothing. I'm not transgender. That's really the only thing about me that my identity relates to the transgender community, is I just wear women's clothing.
So you're a man, or you're gay, so you're a man, you're sexually attracted or romantically attracted or both or whatever to men, okay? And you just happen to like dressing like a woman. But the word transvestite, it seems old school. Like it was one of the reasons that this one popped out at me, because you just don't hear that word anymore.
Yeah, I like to keep it going. There's so much confusion between transgendered and transvestite, and there's a lot of people don't really know the differences, and that's why I like to separate myself from that. I'm not actively trying to become a woman as opposed to transgendered people. I just enjoy the culture.
Right. Now, when did I was going to say this piece of you, but I know you're a full person, but when did you sort of have your awakening relative to all of this stuff?
You mean being gay, or do you mean?
I guess we're talking about two independent things. So I guess first we could answer being gay, and then when you realized that you liked wearing women's clothing.
Well, let's see. For a very long time, I kind of thought I was gay. Growing up, I never, I had my first girlfriend in high school, but I never wanted to do anything, and
not even wear her clothes. Come on.
No, that came afterwards. When I came out as gay in my sophomore year of high school, and I got a lot of support from my friends and from some of my family. Other parts, not so much. But the whole clothing thing happened. I was friends with someone who was a cross-dresser, and I loved the style. I wanted, I don't know, in a way, I was just trying to find myself as a high school kid.
Yeah. How is being a crossdresser different than being a transvestite?
Well, I suppose it's the same thing. It's just more of a technical name for it.
Oh, all right. You know, these days there's so many terms for everything that I thought there might be some little piece of that I'm unaware of. How accepted are you by friends and family and things of that nature?
Oh, I'm very accepted. Like, when I first came out, I figured it would be a shitstorm. I figured I'd be hated, my friends would turn on me. But no, it was actually, most of my friends didn't believe me. They thought I was just trolling them or something. My dad, he had, I think, the best reaction possible to me coming out as gay. He sat me down in the kitchen and he looked me in the face and he said, you know, I just need to get this straight. So you don't like boobs? They're like the best. And my mom had a very different reaction. Me and her fought. She's a very religious person. And long story short, we haven't talked in over 5 years. So yeah. But mostly I've been accepted by all my friends and the majority of my family.
Well, let's now talk about the last part of this thing, which is the least acceptable by the mainstream. Forget transvestite, forget gay, half white, half Latino, blah, blah, blah. Trump supporter, the most vile of all things.
All right, so it was a very slow, well, actually kind of a rapid transition. So back before the election started, I was a Bernie supporter for the most part because all my friends were, but I never really knew what his policies were. I never really was interested in politics. And coincidentally, I was just about to go into a government class at my college. And that sparked an interest in politics. And when I heard Bernie Sanders say, white people don't know what it's like to be poor, that threw me off from him. And I started like, okay, well, maybe Hillary's a better example. And then I saw all the scandals she went through. I saw the people on the left that I admired, like the Young Turks. I saw Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian lose it on I think it was the RNC. I forgot who this man was, but
it was Alex Jones. Alex Jones.
Yeah, and calls them a fat fuck on live TV after on the show she says that you shouldn't make fun of people's weight and appearances. And I saw a lot of hypocrisy come from my side, and then I see, you know, like people like Milo Yiannopoulos, and they're pointing out all the BS that I was just in, and I just realized, I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. I don't want to be a part of this.
Did you feel that you had to come out as a Trump supporter? Because I've gotten a lot of emails from from gay people who have said to me, you know, coming out as gay was one thing, it was tough, but coming out as a Trump supporter was way worse than that.
Oh, absolutely. Coming out as a Trump supporter was way worse because I had longtime friends disown me because I came out that way. And I had no idea that my friends felt so strongly about this. I had one friend who, me and him have been friends for like 6 years, and just the fact that I voted for him, he said that you condone everything that Trump does and says. And I'm like, I like some of his policies. I like him more than Hillary. And and then no, it was just like he called me a bigot, a racist, ignorant, and I'm like, really? I'm racist. Like I'm a bigot. That makes sense. I'm like, I've sucked every color of cock on the ethnic rainbow. I'm a racist.
Okay, good transition to what I wanted to bring up, which was that you say that you get called a racist, which really in and of itself is racist because they'll use the white half of you to say your white half basically is racist, but half of you is Latino as well.
Exactly. And so it's so annoying. People will look at me and say white, but then they forget. I remind them, I'm like, I'm just as much Latino as I am white. I'm like, what? Shouldn't that count? And then they only see that part, and then they call me a racist, and it's so annoying, the whole hypocrisy of everything.
Yeah, so one of the things that we see, if you pay attention to mainstream media all the time, you see like all these the hysterics of the kids on the left and burning down Berkeley and protesting speakers and Antifa and all these young people silencing other people. So one of the things that you wanted to talk about is that there is a growing movement on college campuses, from at least what you're seeing, of young people leaving the left. I know a little something about this, although I guess it took me about 20 years past the point it took you.
Yeah, I left. I've been talking with some of my friends who also were afraid to come out and say they were Trump supporters to me because they knew me in the past and how, I'm gay and I'm, cross-dressing, and they assume that I'm a Hillary supporter, and so they would lightly touch on the subject about how they kind of thought that they kind of had similar views to what Trump is saying, and once I said like, oh, you like watching Milo, you like watching Sargon of Akkad, and then they were like, oh my God, yeah, and so we all just kind of found out we all supported Trump, and it's actually quite a big number of my friends that did it, and also there's also young conservative movements on my campus at UNT. They're starting to grow. And it's really interesting because it's like a quiet shift over, and
yeah,
it's
so
very
traditional thinking though would force people to believe that you, as a gay transvestite, would not be accepted by those evil conservatives and the evil college Republicans. Are you finding that to be the case at all?
Oh no, and that's what I thought when I first wanted to join the young conservatives movement on my campus, but they welcomed me with open arms. They were like, whoa, like someone that looks like you want to join us? Like, sure, go ahead. And I've had nothing but friendly interactions with people on the right, and this whole time I thought they were just, evil and bigoted. And it turns out it's the complete opposite.
When you hear people screaming about, gender pronouns and we see people getting in trouble for accidentally calling he a she or she a he. On my Facebook page, I have like 80 options for gender. I can literally choose it is one of the options, which that actually does seem offensive to me. I'm still going with male on there, just for the hell of it. But does any of that, do you think there's any legitimacy to any of that, or does all of it just seem ridiculous to you as someone that obviously has a sense of humor and it doesn't take offense, seemingly?
It all seems like BS to me. It's like when people misgender me, I don't give a shit. Like some people, like I'll sit down at a restaurant, and if the waiter comes up behind me, they'll be like, "Oh, hello, madam, how are you today?" And I just kind of laugh it off. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And then people most of the time can just tell, but sometimes people aren't too sure what to address me as. And I don't care either way because I know people have the best intentions, so it doesn't bother me. And the whole like him, her, zer, that whole thing, I think it's just hilarious. Like I'm like, I can't believe this is even a thing. And
All right. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And, I love people that buck the stereotypes and that do it unabashedly. And I think you fit right in there. And good luck with everything you're doing. What are you studying, by the way?
Psychology and neuroscience.
Oh, we could have a transvestite Sam Harris right here. All right, I'm on with Charles, who is in the Gulf region, a slightly unidentified part of the Gulf region, via Norway. Charles, how are you?
Hi, wonderful, thank you, and thank you very much for having me on.
I feel bad because you're better dressed than I am.
I'm actually still at work, so yeah, we had to adapt. It's another time zone here.
Yeah,
but,
so I know.
Thank you very much.
So I know that you didn't want to specifically say where you are, which I'm completely fine with. But how does somebody get from Norway to living and obviously doing work in the Gulf region?
Well, what happened at the age of 19, I went to do something that some European young men do. I went on to join the French Foreign Legion, and which is a fairly special unit. And I worked for the French Armed Forces for a 15-year period, all over Africa, all over the Middle East, and in Europe, mainly in conflicts, civil war conflicts that gave me a perspective of the situation, of the violence, of the difficult times. So it gave me a very good base to continue a second career, where I've been working now for the last 17 years in Africa and mainly the Gulf region. I've been living 7 years in Iran. I've been living in several other countries in the region where I belong to a company that advises foreign industrials and other type of companies on the security processes to proceed, how to proceed or not to proceed, and in what conditions. So this made me have a little bit of an insight, a little bit of knowledge, and I thought, coming to an excellent show like yours, I've been following you closely, and I really feel that you are on the right track.
Thanks.
You're talking about ideas, you're talking about a lot of things, and that's how we should proceed. And I thought I could add a little bit to add on to that.
Yeah, and that's one of the many reasons we selected you out of over 2,000 people. So tell me a little bit about just the cultural differences that you have to deal with. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the politics too, but just culturally, as I think you said you're 51 years old, so you grew up in the West. What are you seeing on the cultural side, the good and the bad?
Well, what we should first of all keep in mind is that the Middle Eastern culture is, first of all, it's a very old one, very old culture, much older than ours. They have histories that go thousands of years back, which they are very proud of. And you can give them right or wrong, but this goes into an establishment of a culture that is old, that is built on old traditions, that they are very proud of. The Norwegian culture is, of course, very different. We are young culture, it's a young country and successful in many ways, but I have married an Iranian girl a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I have a large Iranian family and a large Norwegian family on the other side. It's two completely different worlds with different, I would say, core values. Not that they are completely different, but they vary. And you have to have a completely different perspective whenever you deal with one or the other. And, do you feel
that marrying into an Iranian family for you was the best way that you could share Western values with them, and maybe vice versa for your wife?
Well, I got married because I love her, not because of sharing cultures. But
after the love thing.
Yeah, that was quite a discovery, and you have to that's when you really get into the depth of a culture and really understanding the fundamental difference that are there that you deal with on a daily basis, and it have to become a second nature. And it's not so difficult, but you have to accept that things are more important in one and less important in the other, and you get on like that, indeed.
Yeah. How much do you feel that you're able to express your free speech, your free expression, the ideas you care about and all that? Now, obviously, you're doing this. We're not saying exactly where you are. But do you feel comfortable just sharing your thoughts on a day-to-day basis?
I do. I feel I know the environment a bit. And I also know that the Middle East is not such a terrible place that we think. I know that, of course, there are fundamental differences. Islam is the third of the monotheistic religions. It came online, I should say, with my simple words, with a bit of experience. The Jews and the Christians, we are second-rank citizens. There is no doubt in the culture, in the ideology. So you have to follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, well, you have to face the consequences. It is a society of what they see as order. We have less order. We call it freedom. But they have a lot of order, right or wrong. They talk about honor. That is not so important for us. They have all these aspects that are not a part of so much our culture. And we were I was always saying my keyword is, why do they hate us? Well, having an old culture. I have a very good friend in Iran who told me, America, who's America? I said, I have a shed in my garden that's older than America. Right or wrong, once more, it is the perspective that is like this. The Islamic doctrine make no doubts. You have to follow the rules, and when they look at us, they have only contempt. We fought wars with them for 1,000 years until roughly 1680 something, the Battle of Vienna, and since that it has been a solid decline. It has been going backwards for the Islamic world. We cannot expect them to like us. They can only show contempt for us. Of course, there is a whole bell curve of people from one complete side to the other, but at the middle or somewhere, there is a heavy weight of people that will never, as long as the religion is an important factor, they will never ever be able to accept our society with our morals.
So for those of us, for those of us in the West, or for any of us that are free thinking or trying to use logic and reason and the ideas of a modern society that don't hate Muslim people, that want people to be free, that want to respect the ideas that you're talking about, even if those aren't the ideas that you personally care about. What do you think is the best way to do a little outreach there as somebody that lives in the thick of it?
Well, I think you should do exactly what you do. That's why I like your show, because you're opening up doors, you're opening up a dialogue. Is often not going to work, but that's where we start. That's where we start to build on it. I have seen over the last 15 years a change, a slow change. There is more and more of what's his name, Mr. Daniel Dennett called the belief in belief.
Yeah,
I see that coming more and more. That's interesting, but a lot of my work is on ground level. With the local population, no, there is a long way to go. There is a long way to go before we get that. So we can make the foreign policies we want. They will not be able to accept us for the moment.
Yeah. When you talk about sort of the belief in Islam that you see and the long history and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't sound that malleable to modern society, but at the same time, I'm hearing you say that there is a change, the belief in belief. I love that phrase from Dennett. So you see this movement, and on the inside, what's it like for the reformers on the inside?
Well, of course, it's very difficult, but the Islamic society as a whole in the Middle East, for the last 50 years, have been hit hard, very hard, by the new media. 50 years ago, it was the cinema, then it was television, now it's social media, it's internet. They are shaken in the foundations over what they see. Of course, contempt and anger of all this lack of moral and lack of a lot of things, but also there is a doubt that starts to grow, which is reinforced by we are so successful. They don't like it, but in reality, they see that our society is successful. So there is slowly, I see, in the more educated part of the population, of course, I see this sort of, well, we'll keep the belief in belief and we'll start to adapt to the rest. Yeah. The other major obstacle we face is the corruption. As long as the corruption is so developed, we cannot make the foundations of a solid working state. We cannot develop. And that's where, as long as we cannot get all these things into place, we are blocked where we are.
Right, and that locking is interesting because that's a catch-22 where it's like, I'm not for nation building and any of that stuff. I know the more we go in, the more we often screw things up. And yet at the same time, if we leave these corrupt people in charge, well, usually it just gets more corrupt, and so that's what really causes the tension here.
That's really what's causing the tension. So, you know, they have received the Western world in the face with different dictators and different things for a long time. So they have no reason to believe that it's going to work, and that's why we see a return towards more Islamic values in some places. But on the other hand, when we see the violence of the Islamic terrorism today, don't forget, why are they violent? They are violent because they are losing. If the Islamic doctrine was well in place and well established, it could be very, very relaxed and very, very sort of more smooth and kinder than it used to be at one stage. Why is it so strict today? Because people don't want to follow their rules. Simply. A large majority of the people that are getting killed, that are getting in problems with these people, it's simply they do not want to follow the rules.
So there's an interesting silver lining there, and I think that's probably a perfect way to end this. Listen, next time we do this, I'm going to wear a tie because I feel very too formal right now.
It's for me. Yeah, no, that's you have to work sometimes. Sorry, I'll take off the time next time.
I'm on with Artyom in Russia. First off, how was my pronunciation of your name right there?
It's better than most, but you still have some work to do there. So, but it's okay. You can call me.
Can you give it to me with a little good Russian accent there?
Artyom.
Artyom. Okay, Artyom from Russia. You are 23 years old. You're in Russia. I loved your submission. And obviously, we got a bunch of people from Russia. And I knew that we were clearly going to, pick somebody from Russia because everybody's going crazy about Russia. But before we get into just Russia craziness, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm getting a degree in political science right now. I graduated from the Department of History almost a year ago now. I'm married 5 years now almost. I don't know, that's the thing that I've written about myself. There's not much special about me other than, I know about your show and I know that you have this whole thing going on, and I can, try and explain what's going on in here and the perspective that Russian people have and what's going on between our countries from like a perspective of just a guy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why you prefaced it that way, and I thought that was a great way to get some of this out there because we're listening to experts all the time, and I sense that most of them have no freaking clue what they're talking about. So as just a guy, but that's someone that studies politics and is a smart guy and knows what he's talking about. What's going on from the Russian perspective right now with everything related to Trump?
Well, back during the campaign and, a couple of months after he was, inaugurated, it was this, euphoria in Russian MSM. It's like, all the people that just, over about a year ago were just full on hating US, hating Obama, hating everything that's related to the West. The US State Department was the greatest enemy that Russia has at the moment, or had rather. Suddenly everybody was like, oh, Trump is our guy, and America is our, well, maybe not the closest ally, but we'll do great things with Trump. And there was actually after Putin annexed Crimea, there was this meme going on that went kind of like, well, it's rough to translate, but it's roughly like Crimea is ours. That would be the closest. And that meme, as it's always with memes, got recycled bunch of times. And so it was with Trump. So it was the iteration of that meme that read, Trump is ours. Right. Meaning that, he's our guy. And, this undercurrent of, he's a Russian proxy or whatever. Of course, nobody was saying that outright, but, that was this feeling.
So how much of that feeling actually is there? Like, I'm only going to ask you to speak for yourself at the moment. Do you think Trump is a Russian proxy or somehow is colluded with the Russians to become president of the United States? I'm just asking you to speak for yourself, not for your government or for Putin or anyone else.
Of course. That's the only person that I can speak for. No, I don't think so. I think it's ridiculous. Let's put it this way. Let's play it through. What if Trump is actually like Putin's puppet? Even though it's obvious now he's not after the Syrian strike. Well, then it means that the whole world is screwed. That means that, I don't think that Putin is the worst dictator that ever was or is right now in the world, but, he's certainly out there with the dictators. And that means that one of the dictators, authoritarians that we have in the world right now, basically, plays the most influential country in the world like a fiddle. And, that's just, if you say that that's actually what's happening, I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that it's not what's happening. Trump certainly was warm to Putin, but that's the end of it, I think.
Yeah, I like the way you preface that you really have to think it all the way through, because if you did think it through, and for the people that think he's a Russian puppet or that they installed a president or something, well then, okay, so what are you saying? Should we topple our own government and then install a democratic president? And then basically what you're saying is we have to go to war with Russia because it's obviously an act of war to install a president. And I've only known you for a couple minutes. I don't want to go to war with you.
Well, yeah, neither do I. But I want to come back to the media moment just for a little bit. The day after the Syrian strike, it's just like everybody pull out something out of their something and went back to the normal routine that they were doing a year ago. Like, again, U.S. is our greatest enemy, and same with you. I mean, with your media, right after Syrian strike, the Russian connection of Trump narrative, it's lost its strength like within a week. It was gone. So yeah, I think it's complete bollocks. And well, what can I say? And from the perspective of Russians, by the way, our population is very much influenced by the basically state-run media. So this whole meme about Trump is ours, it kind of caught some I don't know, some strength among Russian people, but that wasn't full on as well. So I think we're back to normal now, to hating each other.
which is a real shame, actually, and I suspect that there's ways that we can get through that. Here, we're doing it right now, right? But what about the actual freedoms in Russia? Because that's the other thing that we see a lot in the American media right now, that Putin is a dictator or this authoritarian, and of course he's absolutely done some authoritarian things, and Crimea and all that stuff. But what about you personally, your level of freedom to say what you think, put your face right here and go out there and fight for the values that you believe in? How is that for you?
Well, we've had a number of crazy laws installed within past 5-7 years, which made the country a lot more authoritarian than it used to be. But on a personal level, say I'm doing this show with you right now, I'm saying, oh, put in this and put in that, but I don't feel endangered as long as I don't try to pursue any kind of political career. So that's for the most part, 90% of the time, that's how it works. As long as you just, don't try to put yourself in the spotlight, you can say whatever you want. Apart from a couple of extreme cases where, like, school teachers would be put in jail or fined for reposting some, something about, Putin's suppression of Russian people or something like that. But that's case-to-case basis. That doesn't happen a lot.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned you wanted to talk about was modern leftism in the U.S. But what I thought was particularly interesting about it was you wanted to talk about how that links to what's going on in Russia today. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's actually very funny. It's, let's take the easiest example, the modern third-wave feminists in the West, and the theory of intersectionality that they have, that you're oppressed if you're a woman, and you're also oppressed if you're a woman and you're not white, and yada yada yada. Russian feminists, third wave feminists that just emerged within the last 2-3 years, they take this premise, they don't adopt it at the slightest to the realities of Russia. And they just, they just repeat it. It's like, so hear me out. For example, you have this claim that feminists have in the West that Asian women are oppressed because they're women and they're Asian. And their idea of Asian is basically Southeast Asians. You know, you have eyes like this and all that. So the Russian feminists, they take this claim and they don't transform it at the slightest. And the only ethnic minority that we have that resembles Southeast Asians are, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce properly in English, but it's something like Burats. They look like this. So and so they take this tiny group that it's not actually only tiny, but it's very local. They only live in a certain small area of the country, and they basically propel the things that happen to me, happen to them that are bad to this, like it's a national level tragedy. Like
right, so they're looking for that oppression everywhere. Yeah, and it's not like we don't have oppressed ethnic minorities. We have the whole. I don't know. Maybe it's at this point maybe 10% of the population or something like this of illegal immigrants from the Middle East, Uzbekistan, all those countries, and they have no rights here, basically, and it's not like they're oppressed so much by the people, more by the state again, because they work and live in these terrible conditions. But this is, in theory, the fight that the feminists and the progressives and in general, the more leftist activists, as I call them, should be taking. That they should, stick out for these guys. But that's a hell lot more dangerous, because that's what the state, the state makes money off of. Yeah, it's a lot more.
If you try to stick out for those guys, you're gonna get hit.
Yeah,
but
we got to wrap up. But in like 30 seconds, the other thing that you wanted to talk about, which I think is really fascinating, is that you know about authoritarianism by living in Russia and the way you see it creeping into the U.S. So I know I'm only giving you a little time here, but can you just talk about that really quickly?
Yeah, and there's not much to say there other than that the perfect vehicle to increase the power of government and install in theory in the future authoritarianism is to basically call yourself or somebody else a victim every time you want to expand your power, and this is how it's been installed in Russia as well, because we had some problems with the Russian ethnic nationalists in mid 2000s, and by building this narrative about they're so dangerous and they're extremists in the Russian mainstream media, they were able to install laws that basically limit free speech to a very, very dangerous extent, I would say. So that I think the main principle that people should look out for when government tries to extend its power.
Yeah, so the more they come for your free speech, the more authoritarian they are. Makes sense to me. Well, listen, I don't want to go to war with you. I suspect you don't want to go to war with me. We're agreed?
On the individual level, no. But who knows about our people?
We'll talk, the collective will do that next time. All right, well, it was a pleasure talking to you. All right, I'm on with Cassie in Australia. How's it going down under?
It's great, actually. Today it's a beautiful day here in Sydney, and it's a public holiday because it's Anzac Day, which is like our Veterans Day. So we have a public holiday, and there are marches in the city by ex-servicemen and women. And of course, this is a sign of the times, but there's a lot of security in the city and across the country because of threats that have been made.
Well, we're going to talk about some of that, but before we get started, I got a ton of requests from Australia. So first off, you should pat yourself on the back by being the Australian winner here, because we got dozens.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got dozens and dozens of Australia, and there definitely was a theme within those responses about a feeling that something is changing in Australia. And I think that was very much within your submission here. So tell me a little bit about sort of growing up to where you are now and what you've seen as the change.
Well, I grew up here in Sydney and in Perth, which is in Western Australia. And, I thought quite a bit about this. I've always taken our free speech for granted, and I think a lot of Australians have. The country has changed a lot over the last 20 to 30 years. We have probably one of the highest and most generous immigration programs of all countries, which is a good thing because we're all descendants of immigrants, and I think immigrants bring a lot to this country. But I never thought about free speech. It's really only been in the last 10 to 15 years, and particularly over the last few years, that I'm increasingly worried about attacks on free speech, and we're seeing it more and more in the country. We don't have a right to free speech the way you do in America. It's not enshrined in our Constitution. It's more of a convention. So it really is becoming an issue, and there have been several examples just in the last month where our free speech has been attacked. Is due to speak here, and her tour has been cancelled.
Right. So most of my audience probably knows about that Ayan was going to speak there, and they said that they couldn't make sure it was going to be secure. And then there were some really crazy videos and articles that I saw about Muslim women's organizations basically saying that she was promoting hate speech and all of this craziness. But I think what you just said there is really interesting, that what we have here is a law protecting free speech. You guys have a conviction. It's much easier to get rid of a conviction.
Yeah, it's a real problem because basically, and this is what I like about the US system, it is enshrined in your constitution. It's not here. And I think most Australians, like me over the years, have tended to take our free speech for granted. And I'm really, really becoming very worried. And the thing is, the attacks on free speech are coming from the left.
Yeah, so do you think that a little bit of it is, and I've heard this from a few people, that in a place like Australia, where it's such a big, beautiful country, the weather is mostly good, there's a lot of water and beaches and all that stuff, that the life is pretty good, so you almost wouldn't be aware that anything is wrong because there's so much distraction in a positive way before you realize that something really is wrong.
That's a very good point, and I think most Australians have behaved under that kind of illusion. We've lived in paradise. And it's the same for me. I'm in my early 50s, and I've never thought about free speech. It's only been over the last few years that I've become increasingly concerned about it. And I think, there's just so many distractions. And in fact, Australians are aware of that themselves. We tend to think of ourselves as the lucky country and, going to the beach, sitting in the sun, these kind of things. And yet more and more people are becoming like me. I think there is a growing awareness, a growing worry, and people are waking up.
Yeah, I've mentioned this a few times on the show, but in my old apartment, I had Australians on both sides of me, a single guy and a couple on the other side. And the idea of Australians being politically correct seems completely insane to me, and yet it's creeping there. One of the things that you wanted to talk about, you mentioned an insidious law called Section 18C. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Well, Section 18C was introduced by a Labor government over 20 years ago, and it sort of lay in the doldrums. It's only recently it's probably the law is being used more actively in the last few years. Basically, it makes it unlawful to harass, intimidate, hurt people's, under a clause of reasonably, people's feelings, not feelings. Basically, it's unlawful to commit a public act that is reasonably likely to offend, insult, humiliate, or intimidate another person or a group of people based on their race. Huh. Now, it's a pretty broad law, and basically what we've seen is that we've had cartoonists attacked, or and this law is overseen by a government organisation called the Human Rights Commission, which is basically manned by activists and, activist leftists. So it's very selective about who it goes after. It tends to go after white men or white people for transgressions. So basically what you've seen the late Bill Leak, who was Australia's foremost cartoonist. He was attacked for drawing a cartoon last year on Indigenous issues. Yeah. Seen university students at the Queensland Institute of Technology. These are young white males hauled before the Commission for basically using an Indigenous-only laboratory, computer lab. So it's very selective. This same organisation does nothing about anti-Semitic incitement from Muslim groups. So, it's very selective about who it goes after.
Yeah, so that was another one of the things that you mentioned, that you're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism related to the immigration problem, right?
Yes. Yes.
How widespread is that leaking into wider society, or do you think it's just caught in the smaller immigration bubble?
I think for me, I'm Jewish, and as a member of my community, we have massive security protecting our schools, our synagogues, our temples. Any, communal organization, there's a lot of security. And basically, I think, I can speak for a lot of people. It's not the lunatics on the right that concern us. It's more the lunatics on the left, and it's particular radical extremist religious groups. Which I won't name. I think everyone knows who I'm referring to. So I do feel an increase in the icy winds of anti-Semitism, and I think a lot of us do. Australia has always been a very safe haven and harbour for Jews.
Yeah, and really for all immigrants in many respects. You guys, as you
Absolutely.
said before, you've had great. I think Rita Panahi, who I would suspect you're an admirer of.
I've had one of my heroines. Yes.
Yeah, I just adore her, and I had her on the show, and she's an Iranian immigrant and to Australia, and she said that this is the freest place on earth. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about, which sort of couches everything else, is that you really believe that basically the ideas of Marxism, they're just sort of spreading like wildfire under the guise of social justice and all of this stuff.
That's right. You see, what happens in America, we invariably follow. And it used to take a few years, whereas now, basically, what's happening in America is happening here. And I think that kind of pernicious Marxist relativist ideology has infiltrated the media. It's taken over the universities, not so much the science departments or the medical departments, but particularly the arts faculties and the social science faculties. So you have, just as a quick example, last week, a girl at Sydney University attempted to show the red pill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cassie J.
By Cassie J, yeah. So that was
from one Cassie to another.
Yeah, that was blocked by the Sydney University Union on the grounds that it might physically harm women. So, this is the kind of mentality that's going on here amongst, the social justice warriors. I think most kids at university are just there to study. However, it's the same in the US, it's the same here. Basically, people, I think the majority are cowed or they don't speak up. And, this is happening at universities. The film has been shown. I'm going to attempt to see it in the next few weeks, but they were forbidden to use any premises at Sydney University, and a local independent cinema, Art House Cinema, also refused to play the film. So this is, it's grotesque. And it comes back to my first argument. I am very worried about free speech in this country.
Yeah, and if you saw my interview with Cassie, or I'm sure you've seen some others with her, she's an absolutely lovely. Yeah, an absolutely lovely girl who's trying to stand up for what she believes and what I basically believe are the right things. Well, anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And Australia, of all the countries in the world that I haven't been to, the top two that I've got to get to, Australia and Japan. So maybe we could go out for maybe we'll have a Foster's if I make it there.
Or a Cooper's beer.
Done and done.